The guidance counselor who wept uncontrollably at my cousin Lily's funeral was the same man who violated her trust when she reached out for help raising her siblings. So I became his 6-year-old daughter's favorite teacher and slowly dismantled everything he had built while gently encouraging her to draw pictures of her father as a monster. My quiet crush in the halls. Lily Byrne crashed her car into a telephone pole on the way to school and died instantly. She was only 17 and had just been accepted to Yale on early admission. The entire school was devastated. This girl had perfect SAT scores, led most of our volunteer efforts, and ran the peer tutoring program. She helped organize food drives every single holiday. Her boyfriend, Jason, was our school's star sprinter, already recruited by USC. Lily was unstoppable, barely 5'2", but she had this way of commanding every room she stepped into. But no one took it harder than our guidance counselor, Mr. Denton. At the memorial, he completely unraveled in front of everyone, sobbing so loudly it almost drowned out the eulogies. He gave this emotional speech about how he'd tried to help when her grades began to drop, but she shut him out. He even arrived at the funeral with a bouquet and sat beside her grieving family. Everyone in school felt sorry for him, this counselor who seemed to care so deeply and tried so hard to reach a student in pain. Other teachers comforted him, reassuring him that he'd done his best. The truth was, Lily had been unraveling for months. She'd come into first period late, hair still damp, eyes heavy. She started bombing quizzes in classes she used to breeze through. Her friend Priya once told me she saw Lily doze off while standing upright at her locker. Most people chalked it up to burnout, too many responsibilities and not enough sleep. Rumors floated around that she might be partying too much, trying to escape the pressure. Teachers murmured that even the brightest could crack. I once overheard Mr. Denton telling someone, "Even Lily Byrne isn't immune to senioritis." The funeral was overflowing. College reps who had been aggressively recruiting her sent flowers and sympathy notes mourning her lost potential. Teachers made hushed confessions about how they'd missed the warning signs. Mr. Denton sat front and center, dabbing his eyes the entire time. Then, 3 weeks later, Lily's mom discovered her journal while cleaning her room. She brought it to Priya, said she couldn't bring herself to open it alone. Priya began reading the last few entries aloud. Mr. Denton called me in about my grades. I told him about Mom's 3 jobs and how I had to care for the kids. Then he locked the door. He did it again, says no one would believe me. Priya dropped the journal. Lily's mother ran to the bathroom and vomited. The truth hit like a gut punch. Lily had been raising her 3 younger siblings alone while her mom worked double shifts at the hospital and cleaned offices at night. She was waking up to check her baby brother's breathing, doing laundry, cooking meals, and still trying to maintain straight A's. And when she finally reached out for support, Mr. Denton assaulted her, leveraging his authority to threaten the one thing that gave her hope, her college future. The journal revealed it wasn't a one-time thing. It happened repeatedly. She was caught between keeping her siblings safe and protecting herself. Word tore through our small town like lightning. My mom called me in tears, asking if Mr. Denton had ever done anything inappropriate to me. Parents who once praised him suddenly remembered how often he kept girls after school. Teachers started to reflect on all those closed-door meetings. One by one, girls came forward with stories, uncomfortable touches, lingering hugs, inappropriate remarks, gut feelings they'd buried. The school board held an emergency meeting. The auditorium was chaos. Parents screamed. One father had to be escorted out by security. But Mr. Denton had already vanished, packed up overnight, gone before anyone could confront him. The man who sobbed the loudest at Lily's funeral was the reason she couldn't ask for help. The investigation revealed Lily had been essentially head of her household for 2 years, ever since her father walked out. Her mom had no idea. She assumed Lily was just a late-night study addict, not the one managing groceries, medical appointments, laundry, bedtime routines for 3 siblings. Lily had shielded her mom from it all, not wanting to add more stress. And when the weight finally broke her and she confided in the one adult whose literal job was to support her, he exploited her vulnerability. He threatened to destroy the very thing she'd fought so hard for, her Yale acceptance, her family's shot at a better life. Mr. Denton was eventually found 6 months later, working under a different name at a private school in Oregon. 5 other girls from our school testified at his trial. He was sentenced to 20 years, but Lily was still gone. The community raised funds for her family. Neighbors organized meal trains, sent cards, brought flowers, but none of it could bring Lily back. She had been trying to save everyone around her while the very person meant to protect her was the one tearing her apart, and I was ready to return the favor. 6 months after Denton's sentencing, I walked into the prison visitation room, hands steady despite the fury coiled inside me, as he shuffled in, clad in orange. His eyes widened the moment he saw me. His face went ghostly pale as he sat down across from me, his voice cracking as he spoke. "You're Natalie Lynn, Lily's cousin." I gave him a cold smile and slid a photo across the table. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge, staring at the image of his daughter, Ava, in her school uniform. "Your daughter Ava goes to Brookside Elementary," I said calmly, watching the color drain from his face. "I'm her new art teacher." Denton lunged across the table, but the guards grabbed him before he could even touch me. I rose quietly, leaned in, and whispered that Ava adored her new teacher. The security cameras recorded everything. His outburst, the guards restraining him, my calm expression. Outside the prison, I made a call to his wife, Sandra, confirming I'd be available for babysitting that weekend. My voice was warm, cheerful. Sandra gushed about how much Ava loved me, how I'd been a blessing during such a difficult time. She had no idea who I truly was, just that her daughter's new art teacher had been a godsend. That night, back at my apartment, I stared at the final message Lily had ever sent me, just 2 days before she died. "Can we talk? I need to tell someone everything about Mr. Denton." I never got the chance to have that conversation. Her desperation echoed in every word, and it haunted me. She needed someone to truly hear her, and I failed her. That guilt fueled everything I did. The next morning, I texted Sandra a photo of Ava's latest art project, a family portrait. I asked as innocently as I could why Ava had drawn her father as a monster, thick black scribbles across his face. Sandra called almost immediately, her voice trembling as she asked what Ava had said about her father. I kept my tone neutral, professional, explaining that children sometimes expressed complicated emotions through their drawings. As I asked gentle, careful questions, I learned that Denton had been calling home from prison every day. Ava cried after every call. I let Sandra know casually that the calls were recorded and could be requested. The following week, Denton's mother, Evelyn, showed up at the school, furious. She waited for me outside after dismissal and cornered me in the parking lot, grabbing my arm and demanding to know why I was harassing her family. But other teachers witnessed the entire scene. Ms. Alvarez from 3rd grade ran over to intervene. Evelyn ended up looking completely unhinged, ranting about conspiracies and vendettas. That night, I wrote a long post on the town's Facebook page about healing after tragedy and how some people still defended predators. The comments exploded. Some rallied behind the victims, while others clung to the belief that Denton had been wrongly convicted. The next day, I received a private message from Sandra Warren. She apologized for Evelyn's behavior. Then, unexpectedly, she confided in me, said she was considering filing for divorce. The burden of her husband's crimes was beginning to smother her marriage to his memory. At the grocery store, I began planning my visits to overlap with other victims' families. One afternoon, I found the courage to approach Zoe's mom in the cereal aisle. We spoke quietly, hearts heavy, about the trial and how our girls were coping. Later that week, the principal called me into his office. Evelyn Warren had filed a formal complaint. He waved it off, saying I was an outstanding teacher with flawless evaluations. He even admitted his own daughter had once felt uncomfortable around Denton, but he hadn't acted on it at the time. I offered to organize a school seminar on child safety, focusing on how to recognize and protect children from predatory behavior. The principal approved it right away, calling it a much-needed initiative for the community. During art class the next week, Ava drew another disturbing picture. Her father's hands were red, reaching through prison bars. It was clear the phone calls were re-traumatizing her. I documented everything carefully. The atmosphere in the teacher's lounge began to shift. Stories started to surface. Mr. Howard, the music teacher, said Denton used to linger too long near the girls' chorus practice. The secretary confessed that she used to quietly warn parents not to schedule private meetings with him. Everyone had a story. Everyone had noticed something. And now no one was willing to stay silent anymore. The prosecutor explained that the statute of limitations had expired for Sarah's case. The system that had failed Rose continued failing other victims. Sarah left the office defeated, but somehow lighter. Having finally told her truth to someone official, teachers throughout the school began contributing to an unofficial archive of Warren's inappropriate behavior. The math teacher remembered him lingering outside the girls' locker room. The librarian recalled female students asking to study anywhere but the counseling office. The janitor admitted he'd seen Warren lock his office door with students inside, but had been too afraid to report it. The pattern became undeniable as more people felt safe speaking up. I discovered through a public records request that Warren's teaching certificate had never been officially revoked due to bureaucratic oversight. The paperwork had been misfiled, meaning he could theoretically return to teaching once released. I immediately contacted the state education board, providing documentation of his conviction and the danger he posed to students. Warren's childhood friend reached out through social media, sharing disturbing stories from their college years. Warren had stalked an ex-girlfriend who'd rejected him, showing up at her dorm at all hours. The friend had distanced himself after Warren's controlling behavior escalated, but he'd always wondered if he should have done more. His testimony added another piece to the pattern of predatory behavior spanning decades. Linda discovered hidden cameras throughout their home while packing Warren's belongings. The devices were concealed in air vents, smoke detectors, even inside picture frames. Warren had been monitoring his own family's every move for years. The paranoia and control ran deeper than anyone had imagined. Linda had a security company sweep the entire house, finding 12 cameras total. During Melissa's therapy sessions, she began revealing things her father had told her. Warren had shared secrets about special games that good daughters played. While Melissa hadn't been physically abused, the grooming behavior was evident. Linda immediately filed for emergency custody modifications, using the therapy notes as evidence of Warren's attempts to manipulate his own daughter. Dorothy confronted Linda at Melissa's dance recital, creating a scene in front of dozens of parents. Dorothy slapped Linda across the face, screaming about betrayal and family destruction. Parents pulled their children away from the conflict while someone called security. The incident was captured on multiple cell phones with videos spreading through the community within hours. Dorothy's public assault shattered any remaining sympathy for the Warren family. Prison records showed Warren had been using his commissary account to pay other inmates to make threatening phone calls. The calls targeted witnesses from his trial, their families, and anyone who'd spoken against him. The prison launched an investigation into the harassment network Warren had built from behind bars. Mark Warren approached me with a different tactic, offering $50,000 in cash if I'd leave town and stop corrupting his family. He presented it as a generous offer to help a young teacher start fresh somewhere else. I recorded our entire conversation, then reported the bribery attempt to authorities. Mark's desperation showed how much damage I was causing to their family's facade. The school board voted unanimously to rename the counseling center after the mental health initiative Rose had proposed before her death. Warren's name was removed from all achievement plaques and honor rolls. His legacy at the school was being systematically erased, replaced with memorials to the student he'd destroyed. Linda found Warren's old laptop hidden in their garage, protected by a password she guessed on her third try, their anniversary date. The laptop contained an encrypted folder filled with photos of female students Warren had saved from yearbooks and social media. While not explicitly illegal, the collection revealed his obsessive focus on certain physical types. Linda shared the discovery with select community leaders, further eroding Dorothy's support network. Dorothy's influence in the community crumbled as her book club members distanced themselves. The photos from Warren's laptop, combined with her public assault on Linda, made her a social pariah. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her. I noticed Evelyn Denton sitting in her car across the street during recess, parked for hours, watching me. Her presence was deliberate an intimidation tactic. I went about my duties like she wasn't there. Sandra confided that Denton's prison calls had become increasingly hostile. He was pressuring her to uproot everything, to move away with Ava and start over somewhere his crimes weren't known. She was finally beginning to see the man behind the mask. The other victims' families began reaching out through Zoe's mother, wanting to ensure Denton's family didn't rewrite history. A quiet coalition was forming among those who truly knew what had happened. Evelyn tried to pull Ava out of my class, but Sandra overrode her decision, triggering a public scene in the principal's office. Parents in the front office waiting area heard everything. Evelyn screaming about conspiracies and persecution while Sandra stood her ground. Then Denton arranged for another inmate's girlfriend to call the school, pretending to be a concerned parent, trying to dig for personal information about me. But our secretary, Ms. Coleman, caught the lie instantly. She had become an expert at spotting Denton's manipulations by then. The lines were drawn. Denton might have been behind bars, but his influence still reached beyond those prison walls, through Evelyn, through Sandra, through the phone calls. But I had positioned myself exactly where I needed to be, close to Ava, vigilant, prepared to ensure Denton's legacy ended with him. Sometimes I think about what Natalie must have been feeling in that prison visiting room, sitting across from Denton with Lily's final message echoing in her mind. There's something unsettling in how carefully she orchestrated this becoming Ava's teacher, gaining Sandra's trust, documenting every interaction. Focused, unrelenting, purposeful. My phone buzzed with another message from Sandra. Ava had drawn a new picture this time, a happy family, just her and her mom. No trace of a father. It might have been progress, but the battle for Ava's future was only just beginning. Later that week, I helped Sandra file a restraining order against Evelyn after she showed up drunk at Sandra's house, screaming about betrayal and family loyalty. The neighbors called the police when Evelyn began pounding on the front door at midnight, waking the entire block. The responding officers found her stumbling across the lawn, yelling accusations about me, slurring threats. Sandra stood frozen in the doorway, holding Ava close as she cried in her pajamas. The police report documented Evelyn's blood alcohol level and her aggressive conduct. That report became key evidence in the restraining order. The next morning, Denton's brother, Martin, approached me at the coffee shop. He waited until I was boxed in between him and the exit, then leaned in close and said in a low voice, "Accidents happen to nosy teachers who don't know when to quit." I didn't flinch. I kept steady eye contact while discreetly starting a voice recording on my phone. The barista, sensing something was off, asked if everything was okay. Martin stepped back, but his message was crystal clear. I forwarded the audio clip to the principal and filed a report with campus security. Later that week, Zoe Martinez showed up at my classroom door after school. She was a senior, now reserved, quiet, carrying more than anyone her age should. Zoe told me that Denton had assaulted her during her sophomore year. Her parents hadn't believed her. When she'd threatened to press charges, they warned they'd send her to live with distant relatives. Her hands trembled as she described it all, his manipulation, his threats about ruining her college prospects. He dangled her academic future in front of her like a leash. She became the sixth survivor we knew about, and yet her own family still refused to accept the truth. I arranged for Zoe to meet with Sandra in a neutral, quiet location. Sandra broke down completely when she heard the story, finally grasping the full extent of her husband's crimes. The two of them sat together for 3 hours. Sandra kept apologizing. Zoe, for the first time, had someone who believed her. That conversation was the final blow. Sandra stopped accepting Denton's calls after that. She said she couldn't reconcile the man she had loved with the predator he'd always been. Meanwhile, Evelyn Denton launched a Facebook page titled Justice for Thomas Denton, and it gained traction among his few remaining supporters. She posted old photos of him at school events, curated carefully to paint him as a loving educator. The page pushed wild conspiracy theories that vindictive students had fabricated stories, that a good man's life had been ruined by lies. I screenshotted everything. I was building a file proof of the continued harassment campaign. Zoe and I visited the prosecutor's office together to discuss pursuing charges for her assault. This wasn't over. Not yet. The woman who had once coordinated fundraisers and charity drives was now barred from most community gatherings. Priya reached out to me with something she'd been holding on to Lily's old phone. She'd kept it since Lily's death, unable to part with that last tangible connection. On the phone were voice memos of Lily rehearsing what she wanted to say to Denton. You could hear the clarity in her voice, the strength behind the words. She was practicing how to confront him, determined to speak up. Her recordings provided new, powerful evidence that Lily had been preparing to expose him. My position as a teacher's aide had been cut after Evelyn filed a formal complaint with the school board, but an immediate wave of backlash from parents overturned the decision. Many insisted that I stay on, saying they saw me not as a troublemaker, but as someone who protected their children. The town was starting to choose truth over the easier, quieter lie. Sandra and I formed an unlikely but steady alliance. We were united in one purpose, shielding Ava from her father's reach. We coordinated therapy, after-school plans, and closely monitored any attempts Denton made to contact his daughter. Whatever had led us to this place no longer mattered. What mattered now was that Ava never had to face her father's shadow again. Privately, I played Lily's voice memos for select community members who still clung to doubt. Hearing her voice, her strength, her intention shifted something in them. The recordings never went public, but they traveled in whispered conversations, gently tearing down the last of the denial that had protected Denton for so long. Then Denton tried to kill himself in prison, swallowed a stash of pills he'd hidden away. He survived, but barely. His attorney used the incident to claim his client had been driven to despair by the cruel treatment of his family. It was a transparent ploy, even from a hospital bed. Denton was still trying to control the story. Ava's therapy notes confirmed that while she had never been physically harmed, she'd witnessed Denton's explosive temper. She described hiding in the closet when he yelled at Sandra, covering her ears to shut out the sound. The emotional trauma was deep, but the therapist believed healing was possible, with continued support. Martin Denton's construction company began losing major contracts. Clients quietly backed out. Word got around about the attempted bribery incident. Financial pressure mounted. The Denton family's once secure foundation was crumbling from all sides. People started coming to me with stories accounts they had dismissed at the time. A mother said Denton once commented on her daughter's developing body. A father recalled Denton suggesting his son wasn't manly enough and offering him one-on-one counseling. And then there were his old college friends, casually recounting stories that sounded disturbingly like stalking, like Denton had been honing his predatory instincts while everyone else was worrying about exams. It became clear everyone had seen something once. They just hadn't known how to name it, or they hadn't wanted to. Local reporters began covering the story, focusing on the victim's efforts to push for change. I declined every interview. The spotlight didn't belong on me. It belonged on the ones who were hurt and on making sure no one else would be. Other survivors' families became the public face of a growing campaign for school safety reform. Then, during a supervised prison call Sandra allowed for legal documentation, Denton slipped. In a moment of rage, he blurted out something critical, that Lily hadn't been the first. Others had tried to ruin him before. Sandra recorded the call. It became another piece of the puzzle, clear evidence of a long-running pattern of abuse. Parents who had once stood by Denton began approaching Lily's family with apologies. They admitted they'd ignored the signs, excused the rumors, protected the man instead of the children. Lily's mother met their apologies with grace. She didn't waste energy on blame. She put it toward change. Evelyn Denton was permanently banned from school property after showing up drunk again, screaming about conspiracies, claiming persecution. Security footage showed her trying to enter through multiple doors before becoming increasingly frantic when denied entry. The principal filed an official trespassing complaint. If she returned, she'd face legal consequences. Then Sandra found a journal hidden in Denton's home office. One entry mentioned a student, Caroline Murphy, back in 2018. It was all there: a struggling girl, closed-door meetings, a sudden jump in her grades, then an abrupt, unexplained move out of state. It was the same story, just earlier, and she wouldn't be the last if we stopped now. Sandra managed to track down the Murphy family, who confirmed that their daughter had been assaulted by Denton. They admitted they had chosen to relocate rather than pursue legal action. I ensured Ava's therapy continued uninterrupted, coordinating closely with Sandra to shield her from the adult chaos surrounding her. Gradually, Ava's artwork shifted, moving from shadowy, unsettling imagery to drawings full of color and light. Her therapist noted steady progress, saying Ava was actively processing the emotional toll her father's actions had taken on her world. Lily's mother, Sandra Denton, and representatives from 5 other victim families joined forces to create a memorial garden on the school grounds. The garden would honor Lily's memory while standing as a living reminder of the need to protect vulnerable students. Even Evelyn's attempts to protest the memorial were dismissed outright by the school administration. Evelyn's last-ditch efforts to rally Denton's dwindling supporters fell flat. A community meeting she organized at the local civic center drew only a dozen people. Most walked out early after hearing the extent of the evidence. Her Facebook page hemorrhaged followers as reality became harder and harder to deny. The school janitor, who had once witnessed Denton's inappropriate behavior, came forward with a formal apology to the victim families. He confessed he had seen things, unsettling interactions, moments that didn't feel right, but had kept quiet out of fear of losing his job. His honesty cracked open a much-needed conversation about how institutional silence allows predators to thrive. My reputation as Ava's advocate continued to grow throughout the school community. More and more parents specifically requested that their children be placed in my art classes, believing I would notice red flags they might miss. The principal mentioned that enrollment in the art program had risen by 40 since I joined the faculty. Then came another blow. Subpoenaed bank records revealed Denton had embezzled funds from programs meant to support student mental health. He'd been siphoning money away from counseling initiatives to fund personal expenses. It was another layer to his exploitation, another betrayal of trust. Sandra's divorce proceedings progressed quickly, but her lawyer advised timing everything strategically finalizing before Denton's first parole hearing in 8 years. Every legal decision now came with urgency, each one pushing us closer to cutting Denton out of Ava's life for good. Denton's parental rights were under review, with termination almost certain given the documented evidence of grooming and emotional manipulation. Letters he wrote from prison meant for Ava were intercepted by authorities after Sandra raised concerns. The contents were disturbing. He used coded language to remind Ava of their special bond, urging her not to believe the lies others were telling her. Those letters became key evidence in the case to sever his rights permanently. I understood clearly then protecting Ava wasn't just about therapy or keeping her physically safe. It meant ensuring, by every legal and emotional avenue possible, that Denton never touched her life again. Not through guilt, not through nostalgia, not through lies. The system had failed Lily. I wasn't going to let it fail Ava. During parent-teacher conferences, I stayed calm and professional even as Evelyn's car circled the parking lot outside. Other teachers kept watch, prepared to call security if she stepped foot on campus. The entire school had become a protective barrier, standing between the children and the man who had once manipulated the halls unchecked. The Murphy family eventually contacted Sandra directly, confirming the abuse their daughter had suffered. Though they still chose not to press charges, they submitted a signed statement detailing their experience. Their courage, quiet but resolute, added substantial weight to the growing evidence against Denton. One by one, Denton's former defenders began stepping forward with retractions. After private conversations with victims' families, the town's youth pastor, who had once vouched passionately for Denton's character, published a public apology. He spoke about how easily predators manipulate faith communities and how blind trust had left students exposed. His statement led many church members to reconsider where they stood. Sandra was granted full legal custody of Ava. The judge ruled in her favor, citing extensive documentation of Denton's efforts to manipulate Ava from behind bars. Her safety was prioritized above all else. Denton's claims of fatherhood held no ground in the face of the damage he'd done. He hired a new lawyer, a loud, dramatic figure who tried to reframe the situation, arguing that the Denton family was being persecuted for Thomas's crimes. They filed a flurry of motions alleging harassment, but none of them held up in court. Everyone was dismissed for lack of evidence. It became clear the legal theatrics were more about performance than defense. The lawyer dropped Denton as a client soon after, right after I submitted proof of continued harassment originating from Denton's prison cell. The threatening phone calls, manipulation attempts, and coded letters to Ava all pointed to one undeniable truth. Denton was still a danger to the community. Even his lawyers had limits to what they were willing to defend. Evelyn suffered a mild stroke, which Denton blamed on me during a recorded prison call. He insisted the so-called witch hunt against his family had pushed his mother to a breaking point. But the truth was simple. Years of heavy drinking and ignoring her blood pressure had led to the stroke. Still, Denton needed someone else to shoulder the blame. Lily's friends came together to create a scholarship in her name, dedicated to supporting students who acted as primary caregivers in their families. Sandra made the first large donation funded by selling off Denton's remaining belongings. The scholarship would keep Lily's spirit alive by lifting up students in situations like hers. Ava drew her first joyful family portrait in months, just her and her mother, standing beneath a bright yellow sun. No more shadows, no more fearsome figures. Her therapist said it was the first picture that reflected peace. Healing was slow, but it was real. I compiled a full, detailed report outlining Denton's long history of abuse and manipulation. It included testimony from 6 known victims, written statements from school staff, financial crime records, and documentation of his behavior from inside prison. The pattern was unmistakable and damning. The school board responded swiftly. They enacted new policies requiring all student meetings with counselors to take place with doors open. Windows were installed in every office door, and a confidential reporting system was launched to flag concerning adult behavior. It had taken Lily's death to make it happen, but the system was finally beginning to change. Zoe Martinez found the courage to tell her parents the truth about what Denton had done to her. She stood in their living room, hands trembling, and laid out the evidence I'd helped her gather. Her father cycled from disbelief to fury to guilt in just a few minutes. Her mother sat down in stunned silence, finally understanding the reason her daughter had become so withdrawn during sophomore year. Denton's teaching license was officially revoked after the state board concluded the administrative review I'd initiated months earlier. They sent formal notice. He was permanently banned from working with children in any capacity. It was a small victory, but meaningful in a system that had failed so many for so long. I sent prison officials a comprehensive file documenting Denton's continued manipulation efforts, threatening phone calls, coded letters to Ava, and even commissary transactions tied to intimidation. The warden responded immediately. New restrictions were placed on Denton's communication privileges. Sandra's divorce was finalized on a rainy Thursday morning. The judge terminated Denton's custody rights after reviewing the overwhelming evidence of grooming and psychological abuse. Sandra stepped out of the courthouse holding the final paperwork, her face lighter, freer than it had been in months. She was done. Legally and emotionally, she was no longer tied to the man who had shattered so many lives. Denton tried one last desperate move. He arranged for a recently released cellmate to confront me. The man followed me through the grocery store, eventually cornering me near the frozen foods aisle. He reached toward me, but several shoppers took notice. Security footage caught the entire encounter. Customers called 911 as he fled the scene. Thanks to the cameras, his identity was confirmed quickly. After that, some members of the community began whispering. A few parents at pickup time murmured that I had gone too far, accused me of tearing apart a family already in ruins. The judgment stung, but I kept showing up. I kept teaching Ava. I carried the weight of the backlash in silence, reminding myself that preserving Lily's legacy meant more than preserving my popularity. It wasn't an easy decision, but I chose to release Lily's voice memos to the school board. I knew it would cause a stir, maybe even more backlash. But it was necessary. These weren't for the public, they were private, given only to the board. I wanted to protect Lily's dignity while ensuring that her voice would make the system take accountability. The board members listened. Her voice, so brave, so composed, sparked immediate action. New audits were launched into all district counseling programs. Then Denton requested one final visit before losing all phone privileges. I agreed. Not for him, but for Lily, for Ava, and for myself. I needed the finality. The prison visiting room felt smaller this time. He looked older, thinner, hollow in his orange jumpsuit. I sat across from him, unwavering. This time I came for closure. He hurled accusations, blaming me for destroying his family. I met his fury with calm truth. You destroyed Lily. The words hung in the air like iron. His face twisted with rage, then contorted into something darker, something grotesque, when he confessed what made my blood run cold. He had targeted Lily specifically because she reminded him of his younger sister, the one who had rejected him years ago. His obsession with control over women who resembled her had fueled his predatory behavior for decades. Then Sandra stepped into the visiting room beside me, my scheduled support person for the meeting, a silent show of solidarity Denton never saw coming. His face went sheet white at the sight of his ex-wife standing tall beside me. The power dynamic had shifted permanently, and he knew it. Desperate, Denton made one final attempt to manipulate me. He offered a full confession in exchange for a promise that I would leave Ava alone. I rejected his bargain without hesitation. Ava deserves protection. She deserves truth. There are no deals with predators. Not now. Not ever. He lunged across the table, but I didn't even blink. I stared him down until the guards yanked him back, dragging him from the room. His last attempt at control-threatening self-harm if I didn't comply landed with a dull thud. Empty threats from a man stripped of every ounce of power he once wielded through fear and silence. Evelyn tried one final smear campaign through her fading Facebook group, but Sandra dismantled it in real time, publicly refuting every lie with documentation, video, and testimony. The community had seen enough. When Sandra posted security footage of Evelyn's drunken confrontations and aggressive behavior, even her few remaining supporters fell silent. The truth had finally become louder than family loyalty. During a surprise inspection, prison officials discovered a contraband phone in Denton's cell. He was immediately thrown into solitary confinement, ending his ability to harass and manipulate from behind bars. Isolation fitting, after a lifetime of isolating others through threats and shame. Martin Denton approached me outside the school one afternoon. His posture had changed, his tone, subdued. He apologized quietly. said he'd always had a feeling something wasn't right, but he chose family loyalty over doing the right thing. His construction business had collapsed, his reputation ruined by association. He didn't ask for forgiveness, just wanted me to know he finally understood. Evelyn's health continued to deteriorate after her stroke. Unable to live independently, she moved to Arizona to stay with a sister who barely tolerated her. Her presence in the community faded to nothing. No dramatic exit, just silence. The woman who once terrorized victims' families ended up a burden to relatives who wanted little to do with her. Ava, at last, began to truly thrive. Her therapy sessions were filled with growth. Her artwork blossomed. Gone were the shadows, replaced with bright skies and peaceful faces. She starred confidently in the school play, surrounded by classmates, teachers, and parents who had chosen truth over the comfort of denial. The next generation was safer. On a quiet Sunday morning, I placed fresh flowers on Lily's grave with her mother. We stood in silence. No speeches, no tears, just the shared knowledge that justice had finally been delivered, justice the legal system alone could never provide. Her mother gently squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you," for making sure her truth was heard. At the school, the memorial garden bloomed, roses and wildflowers swaying in the breeze. It became a haven for students in need of stillness. Teachers used it as a space to talk about mental health, safety, and standing up for one another. Lily's vision of better support systems had come to life, even if she never got to see it herself. Denton's former defenders quietly faded from the spotlight. The youth pastor who'd once stood by him relocated to another town. The parents who once shouted his innocence stopped attending school events. The conspiracy theories dried up as the evidence became overwhelming and consequences unavoidable. Truth had triumphed not through spectacle, but through steady, relentless persistence. Sandra began working part-time at a nonprofit supporting survivors of abuse. She used her journey to help others recognize signs of manipulation and reclaim their strength. Her transformation from silenced victim to advocate was gradual, built from quiet courage and steady conviction, not dramatic declarations. The school rolled out mandatory training for all staff focused on identifying predatory behavior and early warning signs. Teachers who once said, "We didn't know," were now equipped to recognize and act. The janitor, who had once stayed silent, became one of the most proactive watchdogs on campus. Determined to make amends, he logged every concerning incident he witnessed, and Ava's therapy notes told the story better than anyone could. She was healing. She no longer woke from nightmares about her father. She stopped flinching when male teachers spoke to her. Her therapist recommended scaling back sessions to monthly check-ins, a sign of real, sustained healing. Children were remarkably resilient when given the support they needed. I continued teaching art to elementary students, always alert for signs of distress others might miss. Parents trusted me to catch what they couldn't see. My classroom became a refuge, a place where kids could express themselves through color and texture, knowing someone was watching closely, not to judge, but to understand. The Denton house finally sold after months of sitting vacant. The new owners renovated it completely, wiping away all physical traces of the family who once lived there. Neighbors felt a sense of relief watching lights come on in those windows again. The home was no longer a haunted monument to secrets and silence. Caroline Murphy's family sent Sandra a letter thanking her for finding them. While they still declined to pursue charges, knowing that other victims had found justice gave them peace. Their daughter was in college now, studying to become a therapist specializing in trauma recovery. Some survivors healed by helping others. The community slowly began to mend from the Denton scandal. New families moved in, hearing fragments of the story through whispers. They learned why certain policies existed at the school, why doors now had windows, why students weren't left alone with counselors. The tragedy had transformed into a quiet warning that would help protect generations to come. Real change didn't come from fiery speeches or single acts. It came from steady, vigilant action, and it lasted. Prison records showed Denton had stopped requesting phone calls. No more visitors, no more letters. He spent his days in isolation, unable to control or manipulate anyone. For someone who thrived on domination, his complete removal from human connection was the truest form of justice. Evelyn's Facebook page was finally taken down for violating community guidelines. Her last posts had become disjointed tirades filled with conspiracies and persecution. Even her few remaining supporters abandoned the cause. The online shrine to denial collapsed, just like everything else they had built on deception. Zoe Martinez graduated with honors. In her college essay, she wrote about how telling the truth had freed her from years of silence. During her graduation speech, she offered a quiet, heartfelt thank you, not naming names, but acknowledging the people who believed her when others refused. Her triumph was a quiet, profound kind of justice, the kind that couldn't be taken back. 2 years had passed since that first prison visit. I watched Ava perform again in the school play, confidence beaming from the stage. She stood surrounded by friends, by teachers who protected her, by a mother who had chosen truth over comforting denial. Her life was no longer shadowed by Denton's manipulations. Denton lived in total isolation now. His legacy hadn't been destroyed by the court that gave him 20 years. It had been unraveled piece by one cousin's relentless pursuit of justice for the girl he'd silenced. I continued teaching art to children who would never learn that a counselor's door could be a trap. They grew up in a school where predators couldn't hide behind tears and authority. Lily's dream of safe spaces for vulnerable students had finally been realized, not through whispered warnings or unspoken fears, but through hard truths spoken aloud and acted upon. Her voice, preserved in those private recordings, had changed everything. The memorial garden bloomed each spring. Students tended it with care, understanding what it represented. Lily Byron's name lived on through scholarships, school policy reform, and the attention paid to students in quiet distress. She'd saved others, not in life, but through what her story had awakened. That was her legacy, not victimhood, but transformation. She had been the catalyst for the kind of change that shields others from the harm she endured. Denton would never teach again, never prey on another vulnerable student, never again use his title to destroy someone's future. He was isolated, his influence erased. His story no longer told through lies, but through the steady dismantling of everything that protected him. I kept teaching, kept watching, kept protecting. The community had learned its lesson about the danger of blind faith and willful silence. And every new policy, every sharp-eyed observation, every brave child who felt safe enough to speak. Those were Lily's victories. She had won in the end. Even if she never lived to see it, the story could have ended differently if someone had just listened to her while she was still here. Instead, it took her death and her cousin's resolve to bring the truth to light. But the change was real. It would last. And future students would be safer because of it. That was the only ending that ever truly mattered. Not revenge, but prevention. Not destruction, but protection. Not silence, but truth spoken boldly and believed without question. Thank you for walking through this story with me. I hope you have a peaceful day ahead. And please remember, speaking up does make a difference. I'll see you in the next one.